Good morning, everyone. Sunday morning, day 5 for me of the challenge. And today we're going to talk about forgiveness. It's an interesting concept. Where does it come from? We are constantly affirmed that in the face of acts of trauma, pain, cruelty, violence, that ultimately we need to forgive the perpetrator. There's a whole pedagogy of therapy out there that says until you forgive your perpetrator of whatever has been done to you, you are doomed to a prison of guilt, shame, all the kinds of things that go with not doing the right thing. But it's been my experience in life that there are acts that occur that are inexcusable, that can't be justified, that they're not reconcilable, really. And yet we constantly get this push to forgive, that we will find no inner peace until we do. And where do we get this idea from? Where does it come from? Predominantly, we get it from religion, Christianity in particular. I like Nietzsche's interpretation of Christianity as the slave religion, because it did arise from the downtrodden, the enslaved of the Roman Empire, and grew from there. This turn the other cheek, mercy, all these kinds of things. I mean, it's interesting when you look at Christianity, apart from the fact that when you look at the 10 Commandments, the first 3, I think, are devoted to how this deity needs to be worshipped. Sounds like a rather insecure twat as far as deity goes, if the first 3 rules for life is how you will worship me. The 4th one of those is that you will honour thy mother or thy father, which always comes first. You will honour thy father and thy mother, irrespective of what they're doing to you. And these are drummed into us from an early age across the globe where Christianity took root and flourished. But in some ways, that enforced forgiveness simply allows the powerful to continue to remain in power without consequence. And I'm not sure how healthy this is for anybody except for the powerful. It's a kind of herd morality, as Nietzsche describes it, where things that we cannot address and cannot resolve are given a pretty name so that we can live with those consequences. And on the post I put up before, he gives a great little breakdown on that. Forgiveness is the inability to exact revenge. So there's something in that. Attempting to force people to forgive the perpetrators of inexcusable, unjustifiable, or irreconcilable acts of violence or difficulty, shame, abuse, simply then loads up the person who's been on the receiving end of that with another thing that they have to feel bad about. Forgiveness requires repression of all those things that have happened to you, this turning the other cheek thing, that there's somehow some justifiable mercy or beauty in this. I quite frankly don't agree. I agree with Alice Miller's take on it, as well as Nietzsche's, that until you can turn and confront your anger about all this head on, you are simply loading yourself up with more pain, more shame, more guilt. And this is particularly difficult for children or people who still have living parents who were part of the pain that evolved, or the abuse that occurred, or the neglect, or the dark messages that were given to someone. So we are, in this honour thy father and thy mother, required to accept whatever they do, even if it's actually slowly killing you. So it binds the person to repression of pain, repression of anger, repression of everything else in order to forgive the other. And there are so many quotes in all kinds of systems. Let me shut my phone off. That purport to giving you the, the freedom, supposedly, that forgiveness will give you. When you look at Judaism compared to Christianity, they're not so big on forgiveness, because at the bottom line of their religious doctrine is a sense of justice, whereas in Christianity it's mercy, and it's the mercy for the other that needs to be offered. And it makes slavery a noble cause. This is where it comes from in Christianity. That, I am nobler than you because I can forgive you for your sins, blah, blah, blah. Now, the reason such things come out of the slave religion is because slaves had no power. They were powerless. So the only way they could endure what they were enduring was to take a nobler look at it. But it was actual denial of the pain, denial of the oppression and suppression of their existence. Sorry, I'm just glancing at my notes. I don't agree with this message, to be quite honest. It's if you are obliged to forgive someone, and as I said, there's a whole school of therapy out there that says you will have no freedom until you forgive, until you acknowledge that you created it, you co-created it, it's your fault, it's your lesson, you've given it to yourself, blah, 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 and you must forgive that in order to move on. I actually think this is a bit of a nonsense, and for the reasons I've just described. The source, as we've talked about already in this video sessions, that when you are traumatized as a child, abused or neglected as a child, and you cannot get resolution for this, you cannot address this, this is the source of all subsequent mental illness. So you want to throw a dose of guilt and inadequacy because you can't forgive on top of that. It simply compounds the problem. In fact, for resolution and healing, the exact opposite is required. You need to stand up. You need to set yourself free. You need to not acknowledge that what happened to you was not okay. You need to be able to express your anger. You need to be able to say no to what has happened. You need to be able to acknowledge to yourself that unforgivable acts were committed against you, inexcusable acts, irreconcilable acts. And forgiveness, the demand for forgiveness, is not about you, the receiver of such pain. It is about the perpetrator. It is letting the perpetrator off the hook, particularly if you haven't done the work first. It's to oblige someone to do this. I'm just getting from Lynette that we're fading in and out. Sorry, sweetie, I'm not quite sure what to do about that. We'll see how we go. But I'll just have a little something here. Yeah, we'll see how we go. Now, the thing is, with that requirement of forgiveness, as I said, it lets the perpetrator off the hook. It is designed to allow for reconciliation and movement forward with the perpetrator. And maybe you don't want to move forward with the perpetrator. Maybe moving forward with the perpetrator, be it a parent or not, is the last thing that is of health or use to you in the rest of this life. Because it's very rare that the perpetrator, the person with power, is going to willingly acquiesce that power and acknowledge that what they've done is wrong. When most people going through a therapeutic process of resolving pain, resolving trauma, attempt to talk to the abuser about what's happened, and, you know, the idea of resolution or reconciliation, it is very rare. It is very rare that a parent will say, yeah, wow, that must have sucked. I really did a bad thing there. Mostly they'll go straight into a process of rationalisation, justification, you don't know what it was like for me, blah, blah, blah. And because they hold a position of authority deeply embedded in your unconscious over how you feel about how you relate to the world, then it immediately pushes that button of, I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, I should be able to do this, I should be able to move on. And it's not always that easy. A much better approach to the whole problem of unforgivable acts committed against you is that you need to work with therapy or whatever means works for you. And there's some wonderful stuff that goes with a variety of techniques available now that allow you to get to the source of the pain and release it in its entirety. And what that leads to is a form of acceptance. It happened. You can't change the fact that it happened. You have resolved the pain and the trauma of what happened, and you simply accept what it is, and that allows you to move on, to put it behind you and move on. Acceptance is about healing for you. Obliging forgiveness for the other is about healing the perpetrator. And that, quite frankly, is not your job. They must find their own way home to themselves and forgiveness of themselves for what they've done within themselves. It's not your job to do that. But the slave mentality of Christianity has given us all an entirely false premise, and there are entire millions of books and ways of dealing with people's pain that are devoted to this. And it just perpetuates the suppression and oppression of those who are on the receiving end of it, as I said. When you do your work, you reach a place of freedom in that acceptance. You reach a place of letting go and moving on. As I said, you may not ever reconcile with the person who was the abuser, and in many very real and powerful ways, why would you want to? Why would you want to? Particularly if they're going to justify or rationalise it or deny the severity of the impact of it or make it less than what it was. And for a child, particularly receiving unforgivable acts at the hands of a parent or a sibling or a close family member who had some authority due to age or power of relationship over them, this is fraught. It's just fraught, and it doesn't allow for release and letting go. There's a quote from Nietzsche where he said, "To shake off with a single shrug many vermin that eat deep into others." That's a powerful statement, isn't it? Nietzsche is an absolute genius. But to be able to reach a place where you can just shrug it off. Okay, yep, that's what happened. That's the vermin that I had to deal with. That's the reality I had to come to terms with. And that, as again, another quote from Nietzsche, that which doesn't kill me makes me strong. Okay, he's right. For those who can process the pain, who can resolve the trauma, who can free themselves, not the perpetrator, but free themselves from the consequences of that trauma, that is a powerful process. And it does forge you in the fire. And as you grow into this over and over again, and grow into yourself powerfully, that freedom that follows from that, that letting go that follows from that, can actually facilitate a kind of forgiveness. And that kind of forgiveness is, it no longer matters. I have grown from it. You sit back and you see that had I not gone through those experiences, I would not be who I am today. This is not to justify it, but this is to come to terms with it, accept that this was your lot in life. And the more you grow into that, the more freedom you attain, it's not that so much that you're forgiving the other, you're simply letting it go. It doesn't matter anymore. You have gained strength from it. You have learned things about the human condition from it. You have learned that you have remarkable talents of self-healing, strength and growth. There is a genuine recognition that whatever unfolds for you, created or co-created by you, and as you get deeper into this process, you do begin to recognize that you are a co-creator, irrespective of whether you understand the plan or not. You are not a victim to anything. Whatever's happened, it has happened, and somehow you've been a part of it and you need to come to terms with it. And when you do come to terms with it, you see the lessons it has taught you, the power you hold within you, the power to grow and rise from whatever unfolds in your life. That in that growth and recognition of strength and power, you realize that it doesn't matter what rolls before you. It doesn't matter what comes into your world, brought by you or not. You have everything you need within you, the strength and the power to rise above it. It helps you come to a place of recognition where you genuinely understand that despite anything the lunatic in your head is telling you to the contrary, you never give yourself a challenge in this life without the solution to that challenge built into the challenge. And the solution to it all is learning to love yourself completely again. All the parts of yourself that you put away during abuse, disempowerment, neglect, whatever it was, all those parts of yourself that blamed yourself for the abuse, because this is what children do. When anything terrible happens, they blame themselves, which lends them very powerfully to that dictate of you must forgive the other, because deep down you believe it was your fault anyway. And yet it's hard to forgive the other, and so you just feel even worse about yourself, that you're even more inadequate, more guilty, more unlovable, more shameful. But as you come out the other side of doing your process work around this, as you face and feel and express your anger, as you learn to stand up and say enough, as you draw tighter boundaries, then that shame and that awareness that somehow this is your fault falls away. You simply see that human life is suffering. Being on this planet is suffering. This is the hell, shall we say. And whatever you're here doing, you have everything you need within you to do it. Self-love is the key. As you learn to accept back the shameful parts of yourself that you punished and found were guilty and responsible, as you bring them back into the fold of your psyche with love and acceptance, then the desire to mea culpa yourself falls away, appropriately so. And you release the perpetrator, not through some, I need to forgive you in order to feel good about myself. I need to forgive you in order to let go of feelings of revenge. And I do agree with Confucius, by the way. When you embark on revenge, you better dig two graves, because you're condemning both to an eternal karmic cycle of nonsense. So it releases the need to have revenge, because you come to that powerful place of, it doesn't matter. I'm done with it. I'm over it. I've grown. I can let it go and move on. So in an egoic sense, when people are being obliged to forgive as part of their healing, it is a shaming, debilitating, unnecessary burden on the person who was on the receiving end of whatever abuse unfolded. On an egoic level, it is highly destructive. When you reach a place of letting go, of innate understanding that whatever it was, you have been forged by it and you have risen above it, and it has made you the strong and powerful person you are today, then on a soul level, that is a much better way to travel. So on a soul level, you rise above. you have been forged in the fire. You can let go, and it ceases to matter. It genuinely ceases to matter. You can let that person go. Not in forgiveness necessarily, but in acceptance of yourself, the misdeeds that were committed against you, and the recognition that none of it matters anymore. You are powerful, you are strong, and you are free. So be mindful of people who insist that you must forgive. Be mindful of people who say, you created it, you did it in all your resplendent, it's as much your fault as anybody else. In the 3D biology that we live in, that is an inherent nonsense. All it does is load up the receiver of such abuse with further disempowerment, further suppression, particularly if it's demanded it be done early, you know. And the Christian religion has fostered this very, very powerfully. This slave religion, as Nietzsche describes it, this turn the other cheek. As I said at the beginning, this simply allows the powerful to remain powerful without consequence for their actions. Enough of this garbage. We have seen what this pedagogy, this poisonous pedagogy, has done to the human condition, what it has done to women and children in particular, the feminine principle. So my advice is don't buy into any of that stuff if it's offered to you. Trust that as you work through on a soul level the wounds and the reality that those wounds have taught you in this mad existence we live within, you will rise bigger and stronger than any perpetrator. And on a soul level, you will treat it with the contempt it deserves, filled with self-love. Be gone. You are no longer of any importance in my life. And if you have been abused at the hands of family of any description, it is not your job to maintain relationships with such abusers. Bear that in mind. Often, if you oblige yourself through the act of forgiveness to reconcile the relationship with the perpetrator, you are in a position where you are constantly pulling the scab off the wound. Every interaction you have, particularly if they've not recognized their own part in it, every interaction you have will remind you of how wrong you are, how bad you are, how unlovable and unforgivable you are, which is already, as I said, deeply entrenched in the psyche in the manner that all children do. When children are traumatized, they don't love the person, they don't not love, the person who traumatized them. They stop loving the part of themselves who was abused, because they do, in that egocentric child view, blame themselves. So don't go there. Don't be told to go there. Don't listen to it. Go within, where all answers lie. Grow yourself, heal yourself, deal with the anger, deal with the shame, deal with the hurt and the rejection and the abandonment. Grow yourself in the fire of your own soul. And after that, none of it matters. And that's a long, slow process. It can take years. But to stay within the realm or within the family that perpetuated the abuse slows it down considerably. There's a lot to be said for standing up, drawing a very clear boundary and saying, I'm going away to work on this one for a while. And until such time as I've worked on it and resolved it within myself, for myself, I don't particularly want to have anything to do with you, because it is like pulling a scab off the wound. When and if I have reached that place of complete freedom and letting go, I may then have a conversation with you. I may, but that will be on my terms, in my timing. And if I'm having that conversation, it will probably just to be drawing clearer boundaries. So in the subsequent consequences of abuse of any kind, that leads to mental illness, that leads to addiction and anxiety and depression and self-loathing and loss of self-esteem and the inability to form healthy human relationships. Take care of yourself, first and foremost. Learn to re-love the parts of yourself you put away in shame and pain. Own all of yourself, including the bit that wants revenge. love it back into existence, acceptance of what happens, and the ability to release it, and in that release, releasing yourself to stand fully in self-love, irrespective of what stands before you. And once you love yourself completely in that way, guess what? You will have no attachment to anything that has forged you in that fire. Well, that's about all I want to say on that today. Thank you, Catherine, for the topic. It's a very powerful one. And because we are all remnants of the Christian faith in the Western world that we live, we've had this garbage pumped down our throats from parental doctrine, school doctrine. It's still handed out en masse now. I'm not a big fan myself, I must say, of this turn the other cheek. I'm a much bigger fan of drawing boundaries, empowering children to stand up and say, no, you will not do that. And as I mentioned recently, when you empower a child to say no, in over 90% of the cases, as research demonstrates, the abuse stops. They'll find a softer target. So empower your children from the get-go to draw clear boundaries, to be allowed to experience anger, to be allowed to experience fear, to be allowed to say no. And that reduces a lot of complications later in life. And that means saying no to any pedagogy that says you will endure because mercy is more important than the well-being of your soul. All right, lovely ones, I hope you're having a divine Sunday, and I will talk to you tomorrow about something else. Take care, be kind to yourself first and foremost, love yourself. Catch you later.